Hello, Jordan Chariton live. Status Coup. We are 48 hours after democracy's end here in the United Corporations of America, joined by Zeynab, who is nice enough to return. We're going to get into your wonderful reporting on it's not just the fact that Democrats lost to the Orange Man now twice in 8 years, but apparently they've lost by default all over the country because they're not running in large swaths of the country, basically unilaterally surrendering it. So we're definitely going to get into that. Smash the like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. John Farina, as we speak, there's already, I think, a small protest, so he's recording it, in New York City against Trump's promised deportation task force. We're already seeing large protests. Chicago had a protest last night, I guess, in response to Trump winning. I'm sure that will spread. And of course, we'll try as best we can to cover everything with the very limited resources we have. But Zaina, I was looking at the exit polls, and then I thought to myself, you know what? You could look at the exit polls for one election. And for those of you that don't know, voters, when they vote, I think they usually get, maybe 20, 30,000 of them to answer questions about the reasons for their vote, get demographic information, et cetera, to kind of give a picture of the reasons people voted, what were the top issues, who were the voters, et cetera. So I said, you know what? I think it's more instructive not just to look at this election, but look at this election compared to 2016 and 2020. Because I really think 2024 is kind of a continuum of 2020 and 2016. But before I get to the numbers that I found that I thought were interesting, we kind of scratched the surface of this yesterday, but I want to really drill in because I don't really think people truly, truly understand how close Joe Biden was to losing in 2020. We were very close to basically having think of 2 terms with Reagan and then Papa Bush. We were very close to having, considering the election yesterday, very close to having Republican rule for almost a decade. Biden, although on the Electoral College, and Colin, if you have the link, I sent you the map of the 2020 results. Biden, he won 306 electoral votes to 232. Okay? So that, on paper is a pretty crushing victory. But if you look at some of the states he won, he only won Georgia. If you hover over Georgia, he only won Georgia by 0.3%. 0.3%. I mean, that literally is a few thousand votes. He only won Arizona by 0.4%. That's literally a couple thousand votes. Won Wisconsin by 0.6%. That came down to 20,000 votes. And when you add those up, and trust me, there's a method to this madness, why I'm bringing up 2020 right now. When you add those up, if he would have not won, or let's say Trump won Georgia by 0.3%, and Trump won Arizona by 0.4%, and Trump won Wisconsin by 0.6%, Biden loses enough electoral college votes that Trump would have won. Biden would have got 269 electoral votes. So I bring this up because, Zaina, I don't know about you. I think Dems took the wrong lesson from 2020. I think that they took the lesson and kind of felt to themselves, oh, yeah, 2016 was just a fluke. Yeah, Hillary, bad candidate, but people still love neoliberalism. When in reality, I think if there was not COVID, which obviously there was, I think Donald Trump is largely responsible for how bad it got that first year. I think Trump would have won again. I really do. The economy, although it wasn't what we think it should be, there wasn't such high inflation pre-COVID. And I think Biden was really a terrible candidate who was in his basement for the most part. And I showed you that map because we could have had 2 Donald Trump terms. And who knows, this is all counterfactuals, but I think Dems took the wrong lesson and said to themselves, hey, after Hillary lost, we moved even further right. And we won. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think that's spot on. And when we look at how voters often trend, there is a scathing there's an emphasis on criticism of the current president. And we were in crisis after I'm not saying that Trump doesn't deserve criticism. God knows he does. But there was a scathing rebuke of his presidency after that to a certain extent. But if there had been more, Biden would have swept, even more. So it was concerning that it was so close. But instead of asking the right questions, they took things for granted. That it all had to do with their messaging, like you said. And it was, this was a rebuke of Bernieism. A lot of folks were saying back then, they were like, this means, this is a rebuke on the left. Do you remember those headlines? They were all over the place. They're like, Medicare for all is a failing strategy. And I'm like, how do you know? Like, just because Biden didn't run on Medicare for all and he still won, would he have gotten more votes if he had? That's not something that you have tested. And I think you're going to show it later, but it is shown in the numbers that, yes, those policies are extraordinarily popular. I mean, Bill Clinton and Obama both ran on universal health care. They both did. That was one of the bellwethers of both of their campaigns. So I think it comes from nowhere. They're pulling it out of their behind when they're saying things like this is a rebuke on leftism and on progressivism, and this just shows the country wants to move more toward moderation, neoliberalism, and neoconservatism. And my thought on that is that their plan is to run as Republicans to beat Republicans. How crazy is that? What is the point of running if you're becoming the person that you're running against in order to beat them?
And, I left off that calculation, by the way, because I chose the 3 swing states Biden won that he won less than a point. But you could have added Pennsylvania to that. Biden only won Pennsylvania in 2020 by like a little over 1%. So the point is, by the numbers, he won big. But if you look at the swing states he turned, he did not win big. He won very, very narrowly. It was because of COVID. Now, I said this morning, I'm going to look at the exit polls from 2016, 2020, and 2024. And the only difference is 2016, 2020, you had the Bernie Woodstock era of 2016 that you and I both remember nostalgically. That was the beginning of the Bernie wave, millions of more people getting into the process. Then 2020, it went from Woodstock to like, holy cow, we might actually win this thing. But young people were galvanized both times. Okay. So if you look at the exit polls, we're looking at the general election right now. If you look at the exit polls for the general election in 2016, Colin, if you have the exit polls that I asked you to highlight. So if you look at the exit polls of 2016, it's kind of hard to read, but I don't know if you could zoom in at all. If not, I'll just read it. But 18 to 29, hold on. Yeah, 18 to 29, 19%. 19% of voter turnout was 18 to 29. Age 30 to 44 was 25%. That's 44%, 18 to 44. 44% in 2016 of voter turnout. So, almost half, getting close to half, was millennials and Gen Z. That's what 18 to 44 is. I'm not excluding my baby boomer audience. I love you, but right now I'm focusing on the youth for a reason. 18 to 44 is millennials and Gen Z, and they were at 44%. Sure, Bernie was not the nominee, but millions of young people came into the process.
Yeah.
Bernie kind of normalized Medicare for all. I do think that had an effect of how many young people turned out in 2016. Okay. Then we look at 2020. Bernie was almost the nominee. Should have been the nominee, but that's another story. Okay. We go 18 to 29. It dips 2 points. 30 to 44. That turnout stays the same. But overall, when you factor in 18 to 44, it goes from 19% of the electorate in 2016 excuse me, 18 to 44, it goes from 44% of the electorate in 2016 to 40%. It's a 4% drop. That's not like insignificant. So Gen
No.
Z millennials, it dropped by 4%, meaning 4% less millennials and Gen Z came out in 2020, even to stop Trump. Remember, this is the most important election of our lifetime. We have to stop Trump. There's a 4% drop. I would argue, well, that millennial group, by the data, Zeynab, you know this better than I, those were the Bernie bros and gals.
Yeah.
And they were very dejected after Bernie got screwed in 2016. We don't need to relitigate the whole thing, but we know what happened. And 2020, he got screwed even more, I think. I mean, Obama got on the phone and basically, screwed this whole thing so that they could stop Bernie as Bernie was near the nomination. And you had a 4% drop, drop.
And there's another dynamic to that. When we get into it with the uncontested races, the two highest years in recent modern history was 2020 and 2024.
There you go.
So there's not other people to bring people out either, because sometimes people will come out if a congressman has knocked on their door or a city council member has knocked on the door, they'll come out and vote.
Yeah. And then
there's
you look
a lot
at
of different factors. I think the primary factor is a lack of messaging around what people needed at the time. And then there's secondary factors too.
Yeah. And then you look at this year, because I did a video earlier, we'll show the clip in a little bit, where Joy Reid on MSNBC suddenly gives a shit about the young. It's unbelievable. But you look at the youth vote this time, Colin, if you could put that last one up. Well, 18 to 29, which is Gen Z, the youth vote, 18 to 29 was 14%. Kind of hard to read there, but 14%. That's a 5% drop from 2016. And that is mostly Gen Z, 18 to 29. 5% drop in 8 years. Then you look at 18 to 44. 37% turnout this time around. Compared to 8 years ago, that's a 7% drop. In 8 years, millennials and Gen Z, it dropped their turnout dropped 7 points. That is not small.
No.
That is not a small drop. That's a huge, huge drop. And why I bring this up, Zeynab, and we'll redo the graph later to make it a little easier to read. But, I mean, look at the results of this election. I mean, when it's all said and done, he still won Wisconsin by not a ton. He did not win Wisconsin by a huge amount. Pennsylvania, he did win by a huge amount. Michigan, when it's all said and done, he did not win Michigan by a gigantic number. So if there were more Gen Z, more millennials out, and millennials, it's a large swath. I mean, you go all the way up to age 44. So
I've been reporting for the last 10 years, and I've been telling my candidates that I was advising Gen Z and millennials are to be the largest voting bloc in modern American history. This year, they were set to outpace boomers and Gen X for the first time. So this was going to be a referendum on, are we where the majority of the population is? Are, people running, which candidate is going to run where the majority of the population is as far as this goes? And millennials and Gen Z tend to skew toward progressivism.
Right. Absolutely. And to me, I don't say this, I didn't do this tweet thread. You could read more of it on my Twitter this morning as like, hey, let's bow down to Bernie Sanders because I got a couple problems with Mr. Bernie these days. But I say, this is not about Bernie. Why did you let me tell you something. One of the biggest problems I think you would say, because you were helping in the beginning days, brand new Congress, Justice Democrats, you helped launch both of those. One of the biggest problems you have to gain progressive change is not all older voters, because we have a lot of boomers that are hardcore progressives here, but by the numbers, the most reliable, consistent voters are over 50 years old. That's just the data. It's very hard to consistently get young voters out. So the fact that in 2016, 44% of the vote was 18 to 44, that's big. The fact that it kept declining, I could only surmise that it declined from 2016 to 2020. And then from 2020 to 2024, it's not just because they screwed Bernie. It's because millions of young people for the first time got into the process, entered the process, and they really got excited only to then basically have all the promises made to them abandoned, basically to have twisted justifications for why we can't do things that every other country does. And specifically in 2020, there was a lot of Gen Z and millennials that held their nose. Notice in that chart, it's a bigger drop from 2020 to 2024 in turnout. 2016 to 2020 was a drop, but not as big. In 2020, it's not just that young people held their nose and voted for Biden to stop Trump. There was a and Build Back Better. There was an and $15 minimum wage. There was an and public option. There was an and we're going to stop drilling on public lands. There was an and a $2,000 check, which became $1,400 somehow. I mean, the bottom line is, at a certain point, if you were going to continue, all age brackets, even baby boomers are having economic hardships these days. But I think we could all say Gen Z and millennials have had it a little rougher than baby boomers, Gen X, because we didn't have the built-in advantages that they did. We grew up.
Tons of policies were cut. Everything from, we almost had tuition-free college back then. We had fully subsidized childcare. We had clinics we could just go to, or that, boomers could just go to basically and have all the services they need for their family and their children. We lack all of that now. Plus the hit to the labor movement, repeal of Glass-Steagall. We could sit here for 2 hours, list the things that were cut.
And I don't want people to get mad because sometimes I get older viewers who respond, Jordan, it's not just the millennials. Listen, we're not pitting people against each other, but the data clearly shows that, it was a huge percentage. 44% under 50 is a pretty damn big percentage in a general election. And then to go from 44% to 40%, then to 37%, I could only think, it's kind of, hey, you got me into the process with all this Bernie political revolution, Medicare for all. You got me excited in 16, then damn near in 2020, you got me euphoric. I thought he was going to win. And then it's like the neoliberal empire strikes back. Biden comes in. And he basically, there were some decent things he did, but overall, the best thing he did, as we talked about yesterday, Zeynab, he set all these policies to expire after a year. So like the child tax credit, a lot of the COVID relief was only for a year. So at the end of the day, I think we're going to get to the media lies because, of course, the corporate media is trying to make it seem like Dems lost because they're too woke and they push cancel culture. That had zero to do with it. Sorry to tell you. They lost because they're stubborn inflation, which frankly is in large part corporate price gouging that Biden didn't go aggressively against. But Dems are losing young people. And a lot of those young people, look at the numbers. Trump won. He narrowly lost men age 18 to 29. Harris did not win women age 18 to 29 by what they thought she was going to win. So it's not just that you've had a drop in actual turnout among young people. You're having less of victory in those young people that turn out. And why that is important, at the end of the day, listen, it's easy if you're an older person who isn't as in dire of an economic situation, and there's a lot of older people that are, but let's say you're decent, you're not one paycheck away from being homeless. It's easy to say to the young people, but there's more at stake than that. But if you're living in your parents' basement, which not all young people are, but if you're living in your parents' basement, or you can't even dream of buying a home if you're under 40 or under 50, and you don't really have any hope economically for the future, this is the most important election of our lifetime, kind of falls on deaf ears. And we're better than him. He's a fascist, kind of falls on deaf ears because the party that keeps asking you for your vote and telling you why it's so existential to vote, they're not making your situation any better. So I think it
They're
is.
not even offering. They're not even putting up a veneer of really offering to make things better. It's just we're the adversary to this horrible administration, which we know and we are afraid of, but it's also people want more than just to vote against something. What motivates people more than fear is hope. And hope's not something that they were even giving people this election cycle. I mean, they were running on supposed joy, but people want real policy for that hope. They don't just want, oh, we're happy. What are you happy about? What are the policies? And it was few and far between. They were drops in the bucket that were on the list. And this is the highest office in the land, and it had 5 policies that were specific. I'll give them that. You know, the tax cuts to buy a home. But I think one thing that hit me, and I saw a lot in comments on threads and people were watching Kamala's speeches, and it's when she talked about the middle class, people didn't feel like she was talking. There was a group of people, there was people out there that didn't feel like she was talking to them. They felt like she was talking to the upper middle class. You know, and the Democrats ran on this assumption that people like to be called middle class, and that is true to a certain extent. But when you're hurting and you feel like you're trying to reach toward to become the middle class, then you feel like she might not be talking to you, and she wasn't. When you looked at the policies, you realized, how am I going to save up $25,000 to buy a home, to put a down payment on a home? You're talking to somebody who's 18 to 29, they don't have $25,000. There's a very small amount that have $25,000 in the bank to make a deposit on a house so that they can get that tax deduction. I think they didn't give people enough credit for being smarter about policy.
Right. Absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, you can kind of see a lot of similarities between Hillary. I mean, not to, well, yeah, you know, to brag and say I told you so, but I mean, literally Kamala Harris had her event the last night in the same exact place in Philadelphia that Hillary Clinton had. Hillary Clinton had Katy Perry playing. Kamala Harris had Katy Perry. I'm not trying to pick on Katy Perry, but the Democrats truly thought, hey, if we just put forth Taylor Swift and get the Swifties, and we just put forth Beyonce, and we just spend a shit, and we just literally they were paying. I'm not exaggerating. They were paying off TikTok influencers to come to the DNC, paying for their room and board, probably paying them something extra, which is not really ethical, but anyway, to do TikTok videos for the DNC to make Kamala look cool. Mm-hmm. So it was all vibes and, you know, young, hip, this and that, and zero policy. I keep saying this, Zeynab. I keep saying this because it drove me nuts when I was driving. We're driving through Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and I keep seeing billboards from Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris supports raising the minimum wage. No specifics on what the number is. I mean, I know you can't fit into a billboard. How's she going to do it? But can you give us a number, Kamala? Another billboard.
15 to 20, you know, to 25. What are you going to raise it to?
Kamala Harris supports Social Security. Oh, you got me. These were billboards. I mean, it's just such vague bullshit. Shallow. And when you have shallow, vague, empty bullshit, then if there's a strong man in front of you who's saying everything's fucked and I'm going to fix it and it's the immigrants and this and that, you're either going to have one of two options. And why Donald Trump fundamentally wrong? Well, he is fundamentally wrong, but fundamentally one, he cleaned up and he reversed his losses in the suburbs all over the country. He reversed his losses all over the suburbs, and he did exceptionally well with Latinos. He won Latino men. So that's it. But how did he reverse his losses in the suburbs, which the Democratic Party was euphoric after the 2018 midterms, euphoric after the 2020 election, because they had done a lot better in the suburbs. So a lot of the people, including women, were turned off by Donald Trump in the suburbs. But at the end of the day, yes, everyone's different. Some people vote number one on abortion. Some people vote number one on, guns, whatever. Most people vote number one on bread and table issues, which is the economy. And you had stubborn inflation that in large part in the beginning was a global phenomenon, but then it just became American companies who have purchased Joe Biden and Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell and all the rest of them were just price gouging. And Biden's response was, let me send a harshly worded letter asking the fossil fuckers to please, please, pretty please lower the prices. I mean,
Right.
come on. So I think the Democratic Party is not going to learn the lesson we're talking about because they don't care to learn it. But it's the kids. You're losing millennials and Gen Z, which is then you're risking generational losses for the next 20, 30, 40 years, because eventually the baby boomers, sorry to say, are no longer going to be with us. Eventually Gen X is, so it's just, if you're not going to, if all you're going to keep offering is tax credits, grants, opportunity zones, or whatever the fuck.
Grants. What grants? I didn't hear about any grants, Jordan.
Public-private partnerships, which is just a fancy phrase for privatization. Creativity hubs. I can't tell you how many cities I've seen Democrats are bragging about their new tech hubs or their new cultural centers. If you're not going to offer healthcare, forget government healthcare for a second. If you're not going to just offer real affordable healthcare, not Obamacare, like actual affordable healthcare, I don't think you should have to pay for healthcare. But if you're not going to offer real literally the Democratic Party's response to COVID was to expand COBRA, which is one of the most expensive healthcare scams in the world. I don't know if you know what COBRA is. If you get fired from your job, you could keep your company's health. This is what happened to me when I was at the Young Turks. I got fired, which everyone knows. And the only way I could keep my health insurance, which I needed because I needed back surgery, a doctor told me, if you don't get back surgery this week, you're going to lose feeling in your foot. Because my whole foot was numb and I had spasms down my leg because a piece of my disc had broke off and it was stuck in my spinal cavity. That was from falling several times in Standing Rock, but I digress. I completely lost feeling in my foot. You know, when they bang your knee to get the reflex, I had no reflex in my Achilles and very little in my knee. And they said, if you don't get surgery right now, long story short, I had to pay $650 just to keep the health insurance I had from the Young Turks, and then the copays, and then the deductibles, and then all that. That was their healthcare response to COVID, expanding COBRA. Not, hey, we're going to give you government healthcare during this emergency. Because they knew if they gave us government healthcare during that emergency, I don't think the people were going to accept taking it away. So
no.
I just think, don't get it twisted if any MAGA are watching. The Republican Party is not offering you anything. Donald Trump is not going to provide you health care. He's not going to provide you better education. He's not going to provide you better wages. He's not bringing back the factories. He's going to deport some immigrants, maybe give you, little crumbs of tax cuts, but he's not going to do anything fundamentally to change anything. But I just think when I look at those numbers, when you're losing, listen, you got to, if they keep up their trajectory, Zeynab, 2028, they might have a 10% drop. They're already down 7 in 8 years. They might have a 10% drop among millennials if they keep this up.
I don't think that Democrats are going to learn their lesson. I think the only way at this point, if there's going to be change, it has to be from outside of the two-party system for the most part, because the Democrats, they just keep shifting right. And it is, you can see their shift directly in line with Citizens United. If you've noticed that, like, their shift goes directly in line with Citizens United rulings. And that's because they're banking on this big donor money. Without that donor money, and the argument's made that they have to take that money because Republicans are taking that money. But there are Republicans that run that don't take that money. The people like a Thomas Massie. And it's sad that this time around that Trump did take corporate money too. He took far less corporate money than Kamala Harris did. It's still going to have impacts on what he does. I'm not saying that he's going to be better than her. I'm not trying to lesser evilism Trump. But the fact is, the Democrats took far more corporate money this cycle, which is insane. And we've been watching that shift. I've been watching that shift over the last 10 years. You know, I've researched campaign funding for the last decade, and I've watched more and more and more of that corporate money go to Dems. And as that corporate money, like you always say, goes to them, that's when their platform shifts further and further and further and further right.
Yeah. And before we move on, I want to re-show the graphic to make it a little easier so we could really drill this in. I mean, look at this. Now you can see Colin didn't have a lot of time, so he just did it. I mean, 44%, 44% in 2016 was millennials and Gen Zs. This time, 37%. If the Dems' response to this is to basically become more right-wing on immigration and less, quote, woke, if their response is, hey, let's just do slightly better tax cuts for the rich, if their response is to move further right, I'm going to go with that 37% number, probably going to go down to 33 next time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem because you know what? Not only do we need, I don't want to sound like an old fogey, I am a millennial, but not only do we need young people voting, we need them running. We don't want young people checked out of we don't want anyone checked out of the process, but we don't want young people. They have to get us out of this mess. When I say they, I mean we. I am a millennial. I'm not going to ask your age, but I think you're close, or you are.
I'm an exennial. I'm
okay.
right there on the cusp.
So we need, and we need you boomers too. Well, I'm not pitting, one against the other, but at the end of the day, if we're going to change and I said this in 2020, Zeynab, I said if Bernie has a chance to win the primary, he needs to get 10% of the Clinton normie old fogies.
Well, some of the 2008 housing market crash put some boomers that were lower down, on the economic rung, right into the same boat that we're all in. There's a huge portion of the country that are all in that same boat, and the 2008 housing crash did a lot of damage to boomers too.
Yep. Graham Elwood is no boomer, but he lost his home because of the 2008. Yep, absolutely. There was people I've talked to on the road in 2024 that never recovered from the 2008-9 financial crash. So absolutely. So I'm going to keep that tweet thread I did handy because there's all these Dem nitwits and idiots and pundits on TV are doing the autopsies for why she lost. And they're doing, it's because we're too woke and we don't know how to talk to people and this and that. It's, they always say we don't know how to talk to people or we got to do better messaging. It's not your message. It's your policies.
Can I be frank? They pull it out of their ass. I am a voting sentiment expert. I have spent half my life studying this. That is what I do. I'm a voting sentiment expert. I did not pull it out of my ass. I looked at polls, social media analysis. We did postmortems on the 100 campaigns that I helped run. We talked to people going door to door, which I did sentiment mapping on. When I say the voting demographic is not monolithic, that's true. When I also say there's certain trends, that's because I researched it for years. But these pundits come on and they just talk out of their ass. They just make things up based on their worldview of being from privilege. I'm sorry to say that, but it drives me insane. They're like, how can you make this assumption that they're feeling this way based on what? You don't even live in the real world. You don't even buy your own groceries, probably. You make six figures. You're making if somebody like a Joy Reid's making $6 million, $10 million a year. How do you know what the regular are they even in your circles? Are you even talking to people just anecdotally? God knows you're not doing any research on this. It's obvious. It drives me insane. It's insane because polls show that, people were saying, the pundits were saying all night last night and the night before that Kamala wasn't hard enough on Israel. Polls over and over again are showing that at least 65 to 75% of Americans want to stop arming Israel. Stop arming Israel. Extraordinarily popular stance. But yet their assessment is she's not, licking Netanyahu's boots enough? Where is that coming from? How are these people getting paid so much money, Jordan, to sit up there and just bloviate and make shit up?
That's literally why they're getting paid the money. They're getting paid the money so that they could propagandize, lie, and hoodwink old fogies. And I'm not shitting on my older audience, but by the numbers, the demographic that watches Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN is 55 and up. And I will be an old fogey one day, just like you. Wear it with a badge of honor. But their mission statement, and I worked at Fox, I worked at MSNBC. This is an opinion. I know this is keep the status quo and keep hoodwinking people. There is not this notion that they put out swing voters don't like progressive policies. That's made up. That's just made up. Medicare for all, universal health care is popular among Democrats, independents, and Republicans. There's a lot of progressive policies that are popular among all political ideologies. It's just how you message it to them to make it less scary, because the media has made socialism scary to some age demographics. But Zeynab, I wanted to also play this before we get to what you found. I've been noticing that the reaction to the election by Democratic consultants and Democratic experts and pundits is to go on CNN and say the reason that she lost is because we don't know how to talk to people and we're turning people off with our wokeness. Morning Joe said this yesterday. And, because of our cancel culture. Of course, this doesn't actually match the data, because the exit polls, which we went through yesterday, show the economy is the number one issue, not if you're woke. Colin, if you could play that, it's in the Democratic strategist on CNN absolutely loses it.
Julie Roginski, I want to go to you on this because, of course, he is making the speech at the White House against this backdrop of a lot of finger pointing right now in the Democratic Party. Some who are saying, look, had President Biden not announced, to try to get reelected, and we all know how that transpired later on, perhaps this wouldn't be the situation. And we'll never be able to know, right? What do you say to that?
I'm going to speak some hard truths to my friends in the Democratic Party. This is not Joe Biden's fault. It's not Kamala Harris's fault. It's not Barack Obama's fault. It is the fault of the Democratic Party in not knowing how to communicate effectively to voters. We are not the party of common sense, which is what the message that voters sent to us. For a number of reasons. We don't know how to speak to voters. When we address Latino, and language has meaning. When we address Latino voters as Latinx, for instance, because that's the politically correct thing to do, it makes them think that we don't even live on the same planet as they do. When we are too afraid to say that, hey, college kids, if you're trashing a campus at Columbia University because you're unhappy about some sort of policy and you're taking over a university, and you're trashing it and preventing other students from learning, that is unacceptable. But we're so worried about alienating one or another cohort in our coalition that we don't know what to say when normal people look at that and say, wait a second, I send my kids to college so they can learn, not so that they can burn buildings and trash lawns, right? And so on and so forth. When we put pronouns after names and say she, her, as opposed to saying, you know what, if I call you by the wrong pronoun, call me out, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But stop with the virtue signaling and just speak to people like they're normal. There's nothing I'm going to say to Shermichael that I'm not going to say to you, that I'm not going to say to somebody else. I speak the same language to everybody. But that's not what Democrats do. We constantly try to parse out different ways of speaking to different cohorts because our focus groups or our polling shows that so-and-so appeals to such and such. That's not how normal people think. It's not common sense. And we need to start being the party of common sense again. Joe Biden is not responsible for that. Neither is Kamala Harris. It is a problem that Democrats have had for years. I've been banging the drum on this for, I don't know how, probably 10 years, if not longer on this. We need to get back to being the party of common sense, that people look at us and say, we understand you. We appreciate what you say because you speak our language. And until we do that, we should stop blaming other people for our own mistakes.
Ladies first, your thoughts. You're muted.
I thought it was insufferable. I feel like she's just talking from a place of what she believes herself, which is what I hear from a lot of neoliberals. I'm sorry. A lot of liberals are like, I believe this. She's an ardent supporter of Israel. I know that. She has been a mouthpiece for Israel. She is against the protest because she believes that they are, these are Hamas supporters, as she has described them in the past. She is, she's talking about how she feels personally. That's what I take from it. She's projecting herself onto the voter base rather than doing any analysis on why the voting base actually voted the way that they voted. It's all in, I feel this way. This is why I would have, this is why I'm mad at the Democratic Party. I want the Democratic Party to more, be like I am, to, want to carry out a genocide. I'm tired of people being mad about that. That makes me feel bad. I don't like the pronouns issue. I feel like it was just all projection from her. I don't feel like it was any kind of real, authentic analysis. And I feel like, I'm sure that there's people in chat that will agree with this. We have seen this dynamic, and yes, it's anecdotal, but we have seen this played out on social media for the last year. It's the same. We hear the same thing from neoliberals all the time. It's just an assumption of how people feel rather than doing the work like you do, going on the ground and actually talking to people, doing the analysis with people. And then she says that they rely on polls, yada, yada. Hell, if they relied on polls, their platform would be completely different. Their platform did not mirror anything that the polls show. That's just the truth. It really didn't.
Top 5 issues in the exit polls that voters voted on. Number 1, state of democracy. Don't know how Trump won, if that's the case, but okay, 34%. That was the voters in the exit polls. Number 2, the economy, 32%. 34, 32, I would say the economy and democracy were tied. Number 3, abortion. Number 4, immigration. So that, to me, Zeynab, and by the way, democracy was at 34%. Economy, 32%. Abortion, 14%. Immigration, 11%. Foreign policy, 4%. So here's 2 takeaways from that. A, the economy, by the numbers and by the other questions in the exit polls, the economy was number 1, inflation. But all these people who say the Dems lost because of immigration, well, immigration was number 4 at 14%.
And Kamala's immigration platform literally mirrored Trump's, other than her calling for mass deportation. She was saying that she was going to be the toughest on border in the last, the last 100 years, that she was going to hire 10,000 more border agents, 20,000 more ICE agents. She was going to process and send them back. She said, go home. That was her exact quote. Send them back. Go home. If you don't think that, she didn't say, I'm going to mass deport people like Trump did, but she essentially said, I'm going to mass deport people like Trump did.
But I guess what I'm getting at is that's just the top 5. I'm gonna venture to guess, if they expand it out to a top 10, wokeism and cancel culture isn't on there either. That's not it might turn some people off. That's not the reason Democrats are losing. It's not. No. Republicans aren't voting for Trump because they find Democrats too elitist, or they find Democrats too condescending, or they
do actually.
No. That's
a whole other discussion.
But that's not like the driving reason, and that is literally the talking point I am seeing over and over and over again on MSNBC and CNN. Not that
pundits like her talking down to us, though, and talking down about voters, and that type of condescension does turn people off, though. That is one of the things, when Trump came out, or not Trump, but Biden came out and he said the thing he said about all Trump supporters, or when neoliberals paint people in rural areas as stupid, things like that does have an impact over time. But it's different than what she's talking about. She's talking about something completely different than that, because this is like condescension around our poverty, around us struggling, around our education.
But, the point is, do you need any qualifications to go on cable news anymore? Do you need any qualifications to write an op-ed? Because I didn't take statistics. I failed math, but I could read exit polls. The number 1 issue was the economy. It's very clear. 75% in the exit polls, 75% of voters said inflation had harmed them significantly or moderately, or excuse me, severely or moderately. 67% of those polled in the exit polls said the economy, their financial situation was worse than 4 years ago. Okay, so from that, we must deduce bread and butter issues was the number one issue. So why aren't they going on there and saying, hey, maybe the Democrats and Joe Biden didn't go aggressively enough against inflation? And what could they have done to bring down prices? Because there are mechanisms in our government, which we spoke about yesterday. The president can do things to lower inflation. The problem is Joe Biden wasn't going to do those things because he's at the mercy of Wall Street and the donors, as is the Republicans. He could have said to the fossil fuel companies, your prices are not proportionate with the global supply shortage. You're just price gouging. I am telling you right now, if you don't lower your prices to X, I'm pulling the subsidies. That's it. We're pulling the $15 billion subsidies. He wasn't going to do that because he'd get a slap on the wrist from his bosses on Wall Street. Wall Street is heavily invested in the fossil fuel companies. They don't want the fossil fuel companies losing their free money from the government. Just like that's why Barack Obama let oil police beat the living hell out of Native Americans and their allies at Standing Rock, because Wall Street, the banks, were heavily invested in the Dakota Access Pipeline. That's it. So I just look at, and I just showed one clip. I literally have seen 3 or 4 clips today of strategists and consultants going on saying, yeah, we lost because we're too woke. Well, I don't know. A black guy won 2 times in a row with the middle name Hussein. He won both times by big margins. Can you really be, is woke the problem? And woke, by the way, there was 15 million, there was millions and millions of people on the streets 4 years ago after George Floyd was killed. I'm not saying, woke is directly connected to that, but it's all part of the same umbrella. Woke just means we kind of care about our fellow human man and woman. We kind of care about decency and respect. It's been bastardized. Sure, sometimes it gets a little too far. You go a little far, but suburban people are not voting, did not vote against Kamala Harris because she said they, them too much. They voted against them because prices haven't gone down in 4 years and she's his vice president. That's it. And I got to tell you, at a certain point, and I know people are going to say, right, Jordan, third party, let's go. Listen, I'm not against the third party. You can't find another channel that has had more third party candidates on than I have. But I think we're all got it kind of naive if we're going to get out of this mess just through electoral politics, which we talked about yesterday. We got to look at this situation and say, maybe we need to shake the apple cart a little bit here through economic boycotts, economic organizing, because the Democratic Party institutionally and structurally is not set up to respond to voters. They're not. Bernie Sanders said it infamously. I'm paraphrasing. He said they'd rather go down on the Titanic as long as they're in first class.
Lawrence O'Donnell, what did he say? He said they don't listen to you. He said your vote, that's it. Once they're in office, they don't care. And he's like, if you've guaranteed your vote for them, they don't care what you do. And that is true. I have heard Democrats, higher up Democratic consultants say this verbatim, that they do not focus on people that are guaranteed voters. So that's why they end up shifting their policy more and more. I saw it with one example. I saw it in 2014. I was working Allison Lindgren Grimes' campaign. We had a very progressive platform. They brought a bunch of people in from DC and they completely just watered down her platform. They tried to make her into basically a conservative running. Guess what? She had extremely high favorability because they made all these assumptions about Kentucky because they're not from here. These were out of state, people from DC coming in, trying to run a campaign in Kentucky and not listening to Kentuckians. And so they watered down her platform. They took, she had healthcare for all on it. She had tuition-free college. She had a bunch of progressive policies. They completely took all of those off. They basically ran her as a Republican light, and she was challenging Mitch McConnell. She tanked. I saw her go from extremely high poll ratings to she tanked almost overnight because she gutted her platform of economic policies. And then we had Andy Bashir run on, a combination, but he ran on expanding healthcare. He ran on, some very progressive policies, and he swept in Kentucky as governor after Matt Bevin. So they make all these assumptions, but they don't look at how do you not look at that when you keep losing these races over and over again? The ones that you're actually willing to run in, when you move right, you tank.
Right.
But
Speaking
that's
of,
not an analysis that's being made.
Before we move on to Zeynab's reporting, let me give some shout outs. New Status Coup member David signed up. Thank you, new member David. I sent that an email earlier today, by the way. If you're on our Substack list, if you're not on our Substack, sign up to our Substack. It's free. We are not going to be like every other media outlet, folk. I don't know about you, Zeynab. I've already got 4 emails from media, actually 5. Emails from media outlets begging me for money to be on the angle of Resistance 2.0, that we need to fight Donald Trump. Now, I'm going to say something very clearly. I do think Donald Trump needs to be covered. We will cover Donald Trump, but we are not in the business of being the Resistance 2.0. We're not going to cover Donald Trump 24/7, but we are going to cover everything that the corporate and independent media, frankly, abandon, because they're going to stop covering everything else because they're going to cover Trump 24/7 for profit and clicks. That's what's going to happen. It happened in his first administration, and it's going to happen now.
We're going to get all the coverage of what happens in an administration that we didn't get when Biden was in.
Right. So please support us, because we need more funding to cover what the corporate media ignores, what the corporate media covers up. I do think it's important to cover Trump if he's going to try mass deportation, if he's going to try to deregulate further, if he's going to burn the planet on fire more, and we will cover those things, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So please sign up. We need additional funding if we're going to be able to hire new people and go on the ground more. New member David. Ty, I don't know if that's Ty. Ty donated $20. Thank you, Ty. $50 from HJ. Appreciate your podcast and investigative journalism. Thank you. $50 from Arlene. Totally honor the work you do, Jordan. I'm an elderly woman from Gainesville, Florida. My humble prayers and offerings are with you and your family. Wish I could contribute more. I hope others open their generous hearts to the work you do. Why, thank you, Arlene. That's nice of you. $10 from Elliot. Long-time, low-income supporter here. I deeply appreciate what you guys do, and I'd give a heck of a lot more if I could. While the election last night may not have been a particularly enjoyable time for any of us. I'm with you. Thank you. New Status Coup member, Sumyatam. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Sumyatam. All right, Zeta, I found numbers about the young voters, but you found something quite a lot more interesting, I'd say.
Yeah, so I think that I've covered this on here before, and folks that have followed me on other shows, I covered it on Graham Elwood's show a few weeks back as well, and I've been tweeting about it a lot. But one thing, and it's so amazing, what's blowing my mind is that this has not been brought up on any analysis I've watched anywhere from mainstream media, and the story is so massive that it's kind of staggering to me. So what I have discovered is that, and thank goodness for Ballotopedia gathering all this information for us. They're a wonderful resource if you ever want to learn about elections or anything. I'm not like promoting them because they're like friends of ours or something. They're just awesome. They're an awesome resource. But most of this has come from Ballotopedia and then some independent research that I've done. But I have discovered that 65% of GOP seats across the country, up and down the ballot, have been uncontested. So here is the, thank you, Colin. Here is the webpage about uncontested races in 2024. So what it says here is through November 2024, Ballotopedia has covered 76,768 elections in 56 states and territories. Of that total, 53,413, 70% were uncontested, and 23,000, so they have updated this since the last time I checked, 23,355, 30% were contested. So almost every seat, when we look at that, 2/3 of the country, almost a quarter of the country, there was no one challenging the person that was already in the seat. Most of these states and most of these places, and I'll give you a little bit of history here too, because it notes it. Oh, you can bring that up, Colin. I was going to note the history as well. Let's see, the current year to date of 70% uncontested elections is the highest rate Ballotopedia has covered at this point in this year since data collection began in 2018. And I've looked past 2018, and it's one of the highest rates in modern history. The lowest rate point was 50% in 2021, but in 2020, it was at 65% uncontested. So even in 2020, the Democratic Party left, and I looked at the numbers, about 60% of those seats, so almost all the majority of the seats, because Republicans will run against people, were GOP seats that were just completely uncontested.
And are these concentrated in certain areas or everywhere?
Yeah, can you scroll down to the map, Colin? So here's a map, and where you see the darkest green are the highest number of uncontested. So look at that. In New Mexico, 75% of seats were uncontested.
Wow.
And then you look at Arkansas, 80% of seats were uncontested in Arkansas.
So that's Republicans running unopposed?
Yes, almost all.
Yeah.
And that is also because, and we'll talk about this a little bit after we look at the numbers. Look at this is that Iowa? Yes, in Iowa, 85% of seats uncontested. What uncontested means is that no one is running against that Republican in office. There is no one running against the person in office down ballot. So when you're hearing all these GOP talking heads celebrating because they said that they took the state houses too. They didn't take the state houses. People didn't have a choice. There was no one running in a huge percentage of seats down ballot. This is absolutely insane. Could you hover over Kentucky really quick, Colin, for us? And then I'll let you stop. Oh, Kentucky.
You'll have to. Which one's Kentucky?
Oh, it's let's see, the one right below Ohio there. The one that's kind of long, that's right above Tennessee. Yes. 67% of seats were uncontested in Kentucky. Ohio also had a huge number of seats uncontested. Oh, Michigan's a good one because Michigan went 80% uncontested in Michigan. We're wondering how they lost the blue wall. Look at the blue wall. It's uncontested.
And are these, what kind of elections are we talking? Is this everything from
everything from
city
House
council,
and Senate races, all the way down to city council?
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, we can click off now, Colin. I think folks kind of get the idea there. But so when this began, if I can just take a moment to give some historical context, and I'm sure you're going to be familiar with this. In the early 2000s, there was a debate amongst the Democratic Party about a quote-unquote 50-state strategy. The Democrats had always ran in the past what was called a 50-state strategy. They had very, very strong grassroots, and it was kind of worked in tandem with unions in a lot of these places around the country. They would have in states like Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, West Virginia, Ohio. These used to be states that were the epicenters of the Democratic Party. This was a part of their core base. And they had very strong state parties there. They would pour a lot of money into these state parties because these states were poor. It was harder for them to build up the grassroots themselves to pull the money out of the state for the people to organize there. So they relied a little bit more heavily on the DNC for funding than a state like California or New York or New Jersey would, because they had more funding people with more money in their states. But in the states where there were more people that were impoverished, it was harder to fundraise to build up a robust state party. So the DNC would send money to these states to help them. This year, the DNC raised $14 billion, $14 billion so far, and these estimates are still coming in. They gave, and they bragged about this, but they gave the states 2.5 million, a measly 2.5 million to split amongst 20 states for their state parties. So that's like $200,000 per state for their state offices. So what they have done since the early 2000s is essentially defund state party apparatuses. And the crazy thing is they're also blocking state party apparatuses from building. You guys remember Stacey Abrams, and this is part of the reason that, and this goes back to what you were showing before, Jordan, part of the reason that Georgia went to Biden was because of the organizing Stacey Abrams did on the ground to bring voters out. Organizers there were building a state party that hadn't existed for a long time. Well, for the last probably 10 years. It had been defunded 10 years prior. But instead of helping Stacey Abrams, the Democratic Party got pissed off that it was building, and they literally threw a wrench, and they started insulting Stacey Abrams. They started smearing Stacey Abrams after the election, which is insane. Why did they do this? They don't want it to prove that the 50-state strategy works, because they don't want to invest in these areas because it is not profitable for them. So another thing that they did, Howard Dean, when he was head of the DNC, he ran a 50-state strategy in 2005 to 2006. They took the Virginia State House. They took the Arizona State House. They took the Nevada State House. They regained 5 state houses that they lost after the defunding of the state parties in the early 2000s to focus on post-Bush era. They decided, we're going to focus on a few key Senate seats. We're going to pour all of our money into POTUS and a few key Senate seats and a few key congressional seats. And then the rest of it we're going to spend on consulting firms, because it really is an industry. And so Howard Dean proved that it worked. What did they do? They smeared Howard Dean because he said, "Hoo-ah!" That's what happened.
Yep.
You remember that, right?
Yep.
Because Howard Dean was saying we need to focus on the 50-state strategy. He's like, we are going to lose ground. The Democratic Party is going to become irrelevant. We are going to see the entire country turn red because we have no grassroots organizing. And he was not wrong. Colin, can you pull up those states that I sent you? So if we look here, this is so crazy. This blew my mind when I looked this up. Alabama used to be blue, and we're not talking about Dixiecrats. It used to be blue because it was a hotbed of union organizing at the time. But in 2002, they lost their gubernatorialship, and then in 2010, when their party was completely defunded, you can see the state go deeply red. Look at Georgia.
Wow.
In 2002, when the party was defunded, that's the year it was defunded. Look at what happened after. The state went completely red. We'll go through a couple of these because I want to really emphasize how crazy this is. Look at Kentucky. Kentucky is my state. We brought forward the first ever LGBTQ protections law in 1992 in the country. We brought forward universal health care plan. We brought forward, we used to be an extremely progressive state. And I know part of the problem is neoliberals have this assumption that we're all dumb rednecks that are racist bastards, that vote against our own best interest. But the truth is our state party was defunded. You can look here. Our state house was Democrat until 2016. Do you see that? Our gubernatorialship, we have a Democrat governor right now. We lost our Senate in 2000. We started losing our Senate in 2000, and then in 2003 was when our state party was defunded. But there were some groups that was still trying to build the state party, and you can see that. North Carolina used to be blue. The defunding happened for them around 2006, 2007. But man, people still tried on the ground there, and they're still trying on the ground there. But it's a lot harder when you're a poor state. North Carolina, let's see, West Virginia used to be deep blue. They were die hard Democrats. And their party was defunded back in 2009, 2010, and you can see the evolution of them turning red. So I think that that's the last one, but you can see, what do you think? What do you think about that when you actually look at the information in front of you?
I think it's pretty clear that I think there's a couple things. Number one, when donors give the Democratic Party money, they're not just giving them the money to spend exactly how they want. It comes with directives. And I think a lot of the donors are directing them, we want you to spend the money here, here, and here, because the donors seem to think they have wisdom on where Dems have the best chance versus not. If the donors weren't involved, do I think the Democratic Party today, run by fucking Hakeem Jeffries and I guess Biden and Harris, would embrace a 50
Debbie Wasserman Schultz still?
Right. Would embrace a 50-state strategy? No. But clearly, I mean, at the end of the day, for our purposes, if you are not everywhere, you are pretty much nowhere. And I voted for Jill Stein. You know, I'm not going to shame anyone who voted for Democrats, but Democrats would be doing a lot better if they had a lot more local candidates all over the country.
Yeah, don't you think this impacts turnout? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. Because if people don't have more choices to vote for at the local level, a lot of them just aren't going to vote, and therefore they're not going to vote for higher office. So yeah, I mean, it's astounding. I also think when you say that the DNC is giving them out of the what did you say? They raised billions of dollars?
$14 billion, and they gave the states $2.5 million. Now, I found another article that said out of 300 counties across the country, or 3,244 counties across the country, there are only 300 Democratic Party county offices. That's it. Now, out of the 3,244 counties, there are 3,239 Republican offices.
Well, it also, I mean, it makes sense because if you look at the map, even the map when Biden won, even the map when Obama won, the map, if you just look at it, is a sea of red because Republicans pretty much have consistently won all throughout, you know, the South, the large parts of the Midwest, and Democrats have won on the coast. It's because Democrats seem to only be running heavily on the coast and only, you know, selective Midwest states. They're not running in red areas.
Abandoned Jersey too, and the Jersey map switched. They defunded the Jersey party, and the map switched. They defunded Virginia. They defunded Nevada. You talked about this on your show a few weeks ago. They defunded Nevada. When Nevada switched blue, the Democratic Party came in because it was progressives and defunded the freaking party because it was progressive. They did the same thing to Georgia.
No. You're underselling it. They didn't defund the party. They literally stole from the party. Remember, progressives took over the Nevada Democratic Party a couple years ago. And what did the Harry Reid machine? You know, Harry Reid was the Senate Majority Chair for a long time. He ran Nevada. His establishment DNC chair in Nevada, who lost, they just basically took all the money out of the account so that when the progressives took over, there's no money. I mean, that happened in Georgia. I don't even think that's illegal. But anyway, so it's not only that they defunded, they just literally robbed them blind of the money that they were supposed to legally have access to because they won the elections. So,
and now Nevada State House has gone red.
And you want to know something? I think it's important to point out. I think the DNC in their wisdom, which there isn't much of, they think, well, there's no point in running in these places because they're just rock red ribbed. Well, West Virginia was blue for 100 years. West Virginia was blue for 100 years. Like you said, Kentucky was progressive.
These
Things
people didn't change sentiment in 5 years, 10 years. That's not what
Right.
happened. They were abandoned. They were systemically abandoned by the Democratic Party so that they could focus on corporate donors, post Citizens United, and so that they could pay their consulting firms, because that's a big part of it. That 14 billion goes into consulting firms, and so that they could focus on wealthy areas, so that they could fundraise from wealthy areas, so that they don't have to promote populist progressive policies that are popular in poorer states. That's what they did. And I will tell you something that makes me really angry. When they are running on abortion as a right in states like Kentucky, Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, they aren't running anybody in those state houses. What the hell are you talking about? Vote down ballot. You're not running people here. You have divested in my state. You don't give two shits about my rights. You're not running people. What's Kamala going to do? Is she going to come down to Kentucky and make it a law? She says that only if Congress passes it, then she'll codify it. Well, they lost a bunch of congressional seats because guess what? They weren't running. They didn't run in 17 seats.
I need more of this, Zeynab. I need more anger from you. I like it.
It makes me really angry. Why would they run? It's very misleading for her to run on abortion when the Democratic Party has defunded most of the country and they're running 65% of seats uncontested. 65% of GOP seats in these state houses are uncontested. But they're telling us we're protecting abortion rights. How? You're not even running people. And when they defunded these parties, do you know what the Republican Party did in places like Florida that's now extreme? Places like Kentucky and Tennessee that are passing unpopular, extreme legislation. The Republican Party came and they did this massive grassroots push and they just ran people. They just ran people. And since the Democratic Party was dissolved basically in these states, they had no competition. Didn't even cost them.
So the question is,
they had put aside $1 billion to do that over 10 years. They only ended up having to pay like $40 million.
But the question becomes, I don't know if you have the answer. Why is the party choosing not to run in so many of these places? Because it's not like it costs a shit ton of money to run for like a local city council in Idaho. I mean, maybe it costs more than I know, but like, why are they choosing not to run and just unilaterally disarm in so many places?
Simple. 2 reasons. One, because this way they can have a platform that they say that their base supports, that's neoliberal, that their donors want, by running in rich areas that align with their platform and saying, oh, look, all these other areas are red. They would have never voted for us anyway. All these dumb shits vote against their best interest. We don't need to appeal to them. And that's one reason. The second is to have a boogeyman. You know, I heard DNC consultants getting excited when Trump won because it was going to be a huge fundraising boom. This is real, folks. It's real. I'm sorry, I hate to tell you, but it is real. They do not care when Republicans run. In fact, Republicans winning is great money for their corporation because the Democratic Party is a corporation. And it brings in an incredible amount of money for them. Having a boogeyman allows them to conduct a genocide and still say, okay, well, we're still the lesser evil. It allows them to move as far right as they want to. And so they can scapegoat all of us. They can scapegoat me in Kentucky. They can scapegoat Paula Jean Swearengin in West Virginia. They can scapegoat the people of North Carolina and South Carolina that used to be their base. They can scapegoat us by not giving us a choice other than to not vote at all, or to go in and only vote for president when we have 2 of the shittiest choices on the planet, or stay home. Or maybe there's a ballot measure you might come out for. And I think that impacts turnout. I think it does. When you go in and you don't even see any goddamn choices, you don't want to go back into the voting booth.
And I will say, I mean, to those of you who might be listening and saying, yeah, you do have a point, but some of these states are too far gone for Dems to win. Well, Vermont, once upon a time, was Republican. And then Bernie Sanders won it. He lost a few times, but then he became mayor of Burlington by a narrow margin. And then as time went on and people saw these progressive policies, it turned blue. So
I just showed people within the last 20 years to 10 years, these states were blue. I'm sorry, but the whole state didn't all of a sudden become like right-wing nut jobs overnight. That's not even statistically possible.
Right. I think we need to do a deeper dive on this. I think we need to get more data, and we need to start asking some of these questions because honestly, if no one's going to run, you don't even have to run as a Democrat. I mean, you might have a tough chance. You might have a tough chance independent in some of these areas, but it's better to run independent than nobody run against these Republicans.
That's the only reason I see, I'm with you on methods outside of electoralism, 100%. But right now, because of this, I see opportunity for people to run as independent, especially, or third party, and take some of these seats. And the Green Party did take some seats this election.
Yeah.
But whether it's Green Party or whoever it is, I think there's opportunity to run, and there's opportunity to take back city councils. There's opportunity to take state houses. I think that right now there is an opportunity, and I honestly feel like this is one of the biggest stories being overlooked. If we don't have this story identifies that we do not have a democratic process right now. And Matt does a pretty damn good job, right? I'm like, maybe I'll run for office then, because then no one will challenge me. I'll just run as Republican and no one will challenge me, and then I'll get to do the good work. But, I'll just be able to sit in there because Democrats aren't going to challenge me, and I'll have a guaranteed job. Sounds like a pretty good gig. But I'm telling you, I think that this is one of the biggest stories nationally, and it's just not covered. And it amazes me because you remember, people used to talk about the abandonment of the 50-state strategy. It used to be a part of the discussion. It's just gone. And 65% of GOP seats uncontested is an insurmountable number. That's insane to me. That still rocked my world. I don't even know what to think about it. But I do know I went to vote, and I voted on 2 ballot measures, and I voted for the presidency because that is the only thing that was on my ticket that I could vote for.
Absolutely. I got to run, take care of the kitty, but I want to talk more about this. I want to see more handy-dandy graphs because it is really
Sorry
jarring.
if I got too preachy, by the way.
No, it is really jarring that 80% are uncontested in a lot of these areas, including Michigan of all places. That's nuts. That's no wonder your blue wall is falling if you're just unilaterally surrendering on so many, because turnout's going to drop if so many candidates are running unopposed. It's just common sense. Colin, if you could, or Zeynab, both of you, if you could read the super chats because my kid's screaming again.
We got you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Jordan. Hey, Presence. I saw some of your comments were cracking me up today, by the way. Thank you so much for the super chat. Zaina Day, let's create a new 3D model of voter beliefs. Get rid of the obsolete left-right spectrum. Let's moneyball American politics. I actually like that idea of not having it be a binary and instead having it be a spectrum. Be a lot more reflective. Thank you so much, Robert Copeland. Democrats didn't offer much to help the people. That's right. What was on their platform? Like, what are you saving? Super sticker. CAD, a red heart. Oh, you gave us a red heart. Thank you so much. Justice, Juice. Oh, sorry. Juice tea beans. I don't have my glasses on. I'm getting old, you guys, so bear with me. I should have put them on. Super chat. Thank you so much for your super chat. John Ossoff fundraised off MTG for a fake campaign between him and MTG for Senate instead of raising money for Sean Harris, who is running against MTG this year. Yes, that is a really great example. Another is where the Democratic Party got behind Henry Cuellar over Jessica Cisneros when she was running, and she was very high. She had amazing polls, but they got behind a neocon that was running as a Dem, a blue dog Dem, and threw all the money behind him just to keep Jessica Cisneros off the ticket. And I saw that at Brand New Congress. I saw that happen to dozens and dozens and dozens of my candidate. I saw the Democratic Party, the National Democratic Party, pushing the unions to support Shelley Moore Capito when Paula Jean Swearingen went to the general in West Virginia in an area that used to be deep blue. Let's see. Skeeter. Seeker Gather. See, I saw Skeeter because I'm a redneck. Seeker Gather. Speaking of uncontested, Harris's campaign should investigate the results, considering with all the foreign interference that has been going on with our elections. I don't know. I mean, I think that in general, good post-ops of elections should always happen, no matter what. I do fear veering into a Democratic Party January 6th kind of mentality, but I do think that investigation should be done. I mean, no matter what, we should double check our elections. But thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Robert Pookie Ray. Will Trump pardon Diddy? Are Diddy's terms of investment why Trump has incontinence? I have no idea, but I guess we'll have to wait and see how that all shakes out. But I hadn't even thought about Trump pardoning Diddy. They didn't screw Bernie; they screwed their future. You're right. You're right, General Z. They messed us over, and they messed over the future of the party. Denise, thank you so much for your super chat. The oligarchy pays the Dems to create illusion of choice. Yes. And the Republicans to gut the nation on their behalf. That's very true. Denise, I completely agree. It is the illusion of choice within the duopoly. But you know what's crazy? You know who gutted some of our social safety nets the most as POTUS? Democratic presidents, from Bill Clinton to Obama to Biden. Biden expanded 26 of Trump's policies, expanded them, the bad ones. And the reason that they're able to do this is because media runs cover and sugarcoats for the Democratic Party president. So the liberal media will sugarcoat it, while the right-wing media will still call them a communist when they're basically in office as neocons. And that's the pattern we see over and over again. But you hit the nail on the head. Is that the last one, Colin? Is there anything in chat?
Yep, that's the last of them.
Oh, nope, we covered it. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for getting my stuff I sent over to you ready, Colin. I appreciate that. Or the stuff for our show today. And thank you so much for everyone for joining. Just a couple shout outs to, I see C-Dub, Mud Chat, Chris Garrett. Thank you so much. I saw Jenna Colby. I saw, I just like to give it Fly Chop a Fly. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you so much for every single person that stopped in to watch the show today. Please like, please subscribe, please hit that notification bell. And if you can, sign up and become a member of Status Coup for as low as $5 a month.